Hi, I'm Allison. I've been doing assemblage art for about 15 years. If you saw my last video about sorting found fasteners, you may notice here that I used that technique to find many little tiny screws in that bag of random stuff that I have with extremely specific patinas, but very precise sizes that are all different, and knowing their diameters made that really easy. Today I'd like to do something a little different. I think Assemblage has a very unique capability to start conversations and to give people some confidence in interpreting what they're looking at. A person can look at a thing and know how it feels to touch the material. They can see that it has a history independent from them. There is a place for conversation to start, and it may be a moment of reflection or a group discussion. But if I've done it right, the urge is there. Just quickly, all my pieces have 4 elements that I keep in mind as I design them and make them. The idea that I'm working with, the materials I'm working with, the skills that I'm using, and the cost. So the equation that I use is cost of supplies times 2 plus work hours. Although a lot of people have different equations. So, do what works for you. Anyway, so when I start doing an assemblage piece, I do a lot of documentation and a lot of designing and plan every part of the process over and over and over again. And then as I start progressing and creating it, redesigning over and over and over again, because there are often parts that I can only try once. So it's very much a measure a million times, cut once, rather than measure twice, cut once mentality. They do often begin simply, and this began with an antique radio circuit board. That's just the base of it, the substrate, and the quotation you see here. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in man, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. And that's just attributed to Charlie Chaplin in 1940, but that's very significant in this piece. 1940 was after the beginning of World War II, but before the United States got involved. That is kind of part of a parallel that I want to draw between the choices we are presented with now with social media and just globalization via technology, and the airplane and the radio during World War II. Things that give us instant gratification or allow us to communicate very, very fast. I think in both times there is a choice presented, a crossroads of globalization through technology. That idea hooks directly into the radio board. From there, our attention might go in any number of directions. So I'm going to start with the magnifier over the quote. This simulates a CRT television, or cathode ray tube, which used to be very popular. It also has a couple dials. These are dials from the radio that I actually converted, changed a lot, but you can see that some of them still spin without hurting it, although I don't do that too much because eventually it will just do some damage. Anyway, we are seeing the idea of the world through the screen of a television, media technology that can show broadcasts from all over the world. Down here we have the number 3, and that's really helpful. That is just by chance that I found that on the circuit board. But what it does here is establish more easily that these dials are significant as a group. Even though they're related to the screen, they're independent of it to some degree. So the three dials are linked by a number of things, but one of them is instant gratification, to continue with the parallel between social media and other leaps in technology that have made the world a kind of a smaller place. Up here, the heart is first visible as a heart, a symbol of love. And down here, visible, symbol of hatred and violence. Here, birds flying, symbol of escapism. So that is one level on which they are linked. A second level is this heart is going to put people in mind of an emoji or a react that you might see on a social media site, or just in direct messages, private messages, texts, all kinds of things. That is kind of driven home by these letters here, or numbers. Got kind of the watch hand keeping track of how many hearts you've got there. Down here, one aspect of this is escapism. We've got the birds flying, and not just flying, but apparently migrating or just leaving for the sea from the land over the ocean. But also notice that Twitter's symbol was a white bird. And then we can come to perspective again. If you notice, we are looking down from above the birds, and that can mean any number of different things to different people, but it is continuing, I hope, to give building blocks for a conversation. If you are looking down from a plane, maybe it's the airplane of the title and the quote. If you are looking down from the perspective of God or a God, that is a fascinating conversation as well. And then we come to easily the most confrontational dial, which I'm not going to get into possible symbolism for different people, because it has to do with pretty sensitive topics. But I am going to go through the items that I used here. So, with a bullet shell lodged in a ornate silver base, the viewer knows right away that this is about violence to some degree. This jewel on the top is a jewel. It is not a bit of paint or anything, although, this is just bonus information for watching the video. Nobody could really tell just looking at it. It is technically a watch part 2. It's when someone says a watch has a certain number of jewels, they're talking about actual jewels, and that's a synthetic ruby, because the kinds of pins and screws that are small enough to hold watches together aren't strong enough in some places. So something harder like a synthetic ruby or sapphire or diamond replaces them. Thematically, we're looking at violence that happens as quickly as pulling a trigger or pushing a big red button. The silver base has implications of glorification and commodification and a broader economy. That is continued to some extent on the words that you find on the cap of the bullet. On the top it says federal, but lower down it says S&W for a major company's maker's mark. So this seems like it should be federal ammunition from the word on top, but it's not. It was made by a major company to emulate federal issue ammunition. Make of that what you will. To touch on perspective one more time, you may notice that we are behind the bullet. It's not fired at us, and it is likely that we're the ones firing the bullet because we're directly behind it. To pull back a little bit to talk about composition, I also want to point out that the knobs are, they are clearly related to each other because they're all round and because they are where the dials would be on a radio. Also because of these metallic elements. There is the kind of coppery, brassish top half here. There is the brassy bezel here, and there's the brassy bullet casing here. Those kind of tie in the circular shapes and message of dials to these on the what is mimicking a screen of a television. And it does help bring the eye towards the text. Another interesting element is you've got the heart here, the red heart with the kind of brassy surroundings, and hand, which is actually a watch hand. Then you go down here and you have the same red dot surrounded by brass. And you can also look here and find another significant thing, which is that through that hole in the dial you can see this kind of reddish brown circuit board even in that dial about escapism. And on that note, worth noticing that this is all kind of escaping into these guys, which that's just kind of water pouring out to support the network of wires and stuff. So to put it all together, what does this mean as a collection of objects and ideas if it's not meant to send a specific message? It is a conversation about globalization and technology, but paralleling the 1940 quote to the present day, to social media, to struggling with major issues in isolation from each other when we can click faster than we can think, to those issues as global, war, peace, and inaction, to those issues as personal, love, hate, escape, to the powerful and complicated connections that these things form. A choice from the middle of World War II that we face again and again. Who are we as one person among billions, now more closely connected every day, but only able to see each other through the lens of a TV or computer screen, through items produced with an eye for profit and programs meant to draw us in at any cost, through clashing regulations of international politics, through the structures and systems we live by, not even really knowing how to take a step back and think about our perspectives yet. Even so, here we are, trying to express ourselves on a media platform built for profit, just as Chaplin was in 1940. There's no World War III yet, but there are events occurring that could turn into one, and people who have already made choices to speed that along. I uploaded a video on Christmas morning, and that seemed to get picked up by a YouTube algorithm, and I have to wonder if this is the closest I'll come to a chance to be heard beyond a small gallery. Chaplin said the technologies of his day cried out for the goodness in man, for universal brotherhood, and the unity of us all. He also married and divorced a series of 16-year-old girls, which I learned from the internet on a screen after this piece was complete. As a fellow viewer, I think globalization doesn't cry out for something innate, some goodness in us, some need to unify and do the right thing. It calls out for what we have to become, not what we already are. Globalization cries out for us to be better. If we can't do it, that's too bad for everyone. We stand at an infinite crossroads, every path connecting somewhere. The world moves fast, and we can only do our best, but I urge you to also take a step back, sometimes in process. I believe there is a good path that starts with a step back, a deep breath, and a wider perspective. Thank you so much for your time.